The Assembly will come back to order. We will go to Order Business 4, reports of standing committees.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Ways and Means, to which were referred Senate Bills 454, 490, 506, 511, has had the similar consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass. And your Committee on Ways and Means, to which was re-referred as Senate Bill 11, has had the similar consideration and begs leave to report the same back. The recommendation do pass as amended. Danielle Monroe Moreno, Chair.
Order Business 7, messages from the Senate.
Senate Chamber, Carson City, June 5, 2023. To the Honorable the Assembly, I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bills 15, 16, 37, 77, 84, 125, 128, 137, 138, 150, 208, 216, 224, 237, 239. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bills 245, 246, 252, 255, 258, 259, 261, 266, 283, 290, 292, 299. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bills 304, 310, 319, 321, 322, 328, 332, 348, 376, 383, 388, 389, 396, 422. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed Assembly Bills 434, 444, 451, and I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day passed as amended Senate Bills 375, 400, 419, 510, and I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 7, Amendments 936.
Which one?
What's 968 and 936. Assembly Bill 50, Amendment 986, Assembly Bill 119, Amendment 963, Assembly Bill 148, Amendment 921, Assembly Bill 155, Amendment 961, Assembly Bill 156, Amendment 938, Assembly Bill 160, Amendment 957, Assembly Bill 201, Amendment 950, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 72, Amendment 931, Assembly Bill 243, Amendment 976, Assembly Bill 281, Amendment 927, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate amended and on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill 378, Amendment 977, Assembly Bill 404, Amendment 920, Assembly Bill 430, Amendment 946, Assembly Bill 452, Amendment 675, 964, and respectfully request your Honorable Body to concur in said amendments. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day respectfully refused to concur in Assembly Amendment 734 to Senate Bill 35. And I have the honor to inform your Honorable Body that the Senate on this day appointed Senators Harris, Orangel, and Hansen as a conference committee concerning Assembly Bill 444. Sherry Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of the Senate.
We will go to Order Business 13 for the purposes of concur, not concur. Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill 50 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 50.
Assembly Bill 50, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to crimes, revising provisions relating to the prosecution of certain crimes, making an appropriation to be used for the prosecution of retail crime, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. I have Amendment 986, proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 986 to Assembly Bill 50.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 986 to Assembly Bill 50. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, may we consider Assembly Bill 148 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 148.
Assembly Bill 148, introduced by Assemblywoman Warzola, an act relating to child welfare, providing for the appointment of a guardian ad litem for an incapacitated incapacitated parent or other person responsible for the welfare of a child in certain child welfare proceedings, prescribing the procedure for the judicial review of the placement of a child who is in the custody of an agency which provides child welfare services in a qualified residential treatment program, revising the procedures governing the court-ordered admission of such a child who has an emotional disturbance to certain psychiatric facilities and the release of such a child from such a facility, and providing other matters properly thereto. I have Amendment 921 proposed by the Senate Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 921 to Assembly Bill 148.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment Number 921 to Assembly Bill 148. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, may we consider Assembly Bill 160 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 160.
Assembly Bill 160, introduced by Assemblyman C.H. Miller et al., enacting criminal records, providing for the automatic sealing of criminal records relating to certain convictions of a person and certain charges against a person, authorizing the Records, Communications, and Compliance Division of the Department of Public Safety and the Administrative Office of the Courts to adopt any rules or regulations as applicable necessary for the automatic sealing of criminal records, requiring the Administrative Office of the Courts to submit annual reports to the Legislature and adopt certain other rules, creating the Advisory Task Force on automatic record sealing, and establishing the duties of the task force, requiring the task force to submit certain reports to the Administrative Office of the Courts and the Legislature, expanding the circumstances in which there is a rebuttable presumption that criminal records should be sealed, revising provisions relating to the petitions to seal criminal records relating to certain charges brought against a person, applying provisions relating to records that have been sealed pursuant to certain provisions of law to records that are sealed after a court finds that a person was wrongfully convicted of a felony and enters a certificate of innocence, authorizing the Central Repository for Nevada Records of Criminal History and its employees to inquire into and inspect certain sealed records relating to a violation or alleged violation of the prohibition against certain persons owning or possessing a firearm, making appropriations, and providing other matters properly named thereto. I have Amendment 957 proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 957 to Assembly Bill 160.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment Number 957 to Assembly Bill Number 160. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring with the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, may we consider Assembly Bill 404 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 404.
Assembly Bill 404, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to civil actions providing for the increase of the limitation on the amount of non-economic damages a plaintiff may recover in a civil action against a provider of health care for professional negligence, revising the statute of limitations for bringing an action against a provider of health care for injury or death based upon professional negligence, professional services rendered without consent or error or omission in practice, revising provisions which limit the amount of a contingent fee for which an attorney representing a plaintiff in a civil action against a provider of health care for professional negligence may contract for or collect, and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 920 proposed by the Senate Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 920 to Assembly Bill 404.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment Number 920 to Assembly Bill 404. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill 452 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 452.
Assembly Bill 452, introduced by the Committee on Judiciary, an act relating to offenders requiring the Director of the Department of Corrections to adopt regulations establishing and governing a program for the visitation of offenders, requiring a warden or manager to provide certain notice regarding the cancellation of visitation, establishing the Office of the Ombudsman for Offenders, establishing the powers and duties of the Ombudsman, providing that an offender has the right to receive visitors in person, making an appropriation, and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 960. There are two amendments to this bill. The first is Amendment 675, proposed by the Senate Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 675 to Assembly Bill 452.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 675 to Assembly Bill 452. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in Senate Amendment 675 to Assembly Bill 452 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
I also have Amendment 964 proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 964 to Assembly Bill 452.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 964 to Assembly Bill 452. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor and concurring with the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 281?
We will consider Assembly Bill 281.
Assembly Bill 281, introduced by Assemblyman Gorlow et al., enacting to healthcare, requiring the administrators of the certain senior living facilities to ensure that such a senior living facility is equipped with a functional ventilation system, establishing requirements governing the detection of carbon dioxide at such a senior living facility, establishing requirements for the assessment of and any repair, upgrade, or installation to heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems at such senior living facilities, requiring certain personnel to complete and review an assessment report on such a ventilation system, requiring the administrators of certain senior living facilities to prepare a report on work performed on such a ventilation system, providing that such a report is a public record, and providing other matters properly thereto. I have Amendment 927 proposed by the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur with Senate Amendment number 927 to Assembly Bill number 281.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 927 to Assembly Bill 281. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 7?
We will consider Assembly Bill 7.
Assembly Bill 7, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacting healthcare, requiring the adoption of a framework for the electronic transmission, maintenance, and exchange of certain health information, requiring governmental entities, healthcare facilities, and providers, insurers, and insurance administrators to maintain, transmit, and exchange health information electronically, authorizing the imposition of certain discipline against a healthcare provider, insurer, or insurance administrator that fails to comply with that requirement, authorizing the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services to contract with multiple health information exchanges to perform certain functions, expanding immunity from certain liability for healthcare providers who use a health insurance information exchange, making an appropriation and providing other matters properly named thereto. There are two amendments on this bill. The first is Amendment 936, proposed by the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 936 to Assembly Bill number 7.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 936 to Assembly Bill 7. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in Senate Amendment 936 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment.
I also have Amendment 968, proposed by Senator Doñate.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 968 to Assembly Bill number 7.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 968 to Assembly Bill 7. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in Senate Amendment 968 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 119?
We will consider Assembly Bill 119.
Assembly Bill 119, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacted into adult maltreatment, creating the Vulnerable Adult Fatality Review Committee, providing for the review of deaths resulting from or relating to adult maltreatment, requiring the committee to develop certain reports and perform certain other duties relating to the investigation and prevention of adult maltreatment, providing access to the committee to certain documents and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 963, proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the Assembly concur with Senate Amendment number 963 to Assembly Bill number 119.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 963 to Assembly Bill 119. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 156?
Assemblywoman, which number was it? 156?
156, please.
We will consider Assembly Bill 156.
Assembly Bill 156, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacted into substance use disorders, providing for the separate accounting of certain money for the purchase of opioid antagonists, establishing the order in which a provider or program is required to prioritize persons for participation in certain publicly funded programs for the treatment of alcohol and other substance use disorders, authorizing a pharmacist to prescribe and dispense drugs for medication-assisted treatment of opioid use disorder and perform certain assessments and under certain conditions, requiring certain health plans to include coverage for such drugs and assessments, prescribing certain requirements concerning the diagnosis and treatment of a patient with an opioid use disorder, and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 938, proposed by the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 938 to Assembly Bill number 156.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 938 to Assembly Bill 156. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 155?
We will consider Assembly Bill 155.
Assembly Bill 155, introduced by Assemblyman Peters et al., enacted into healthcare, requiring policies of health insurance to include coverage of biomarker testing for the diagnosis, treatment, appropriate management, and ongoing monitoring of cancer in certain circumstances, establishing certain conditions relating to such a required coverage, providing for a study of the cost-effectiveness of biomarker testing, making an appropriation and authorizing certain expenditures, and providing other matters properly in there too. There are two amendments to this bill. The first one amendment to this bill. The first is Amendment 961, proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 961 to Assembly Bill 155.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 961 to Assembly Bill 155. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill number 201?
We will consider Assembly Bill 201.
Assembly Bill 201, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacted into behavioral health, requiring the Department of Health and Human Services to provide certain oversight and make certain recommendations concerning the children's behavioral health system of care, adding certain members to the Subcommittee on the Mental Health of Children of the Commission on Behavioral Health, prescribing certain duties of a Regional Behavioral Health Policy Board, requiring a mental health consortium to submit certain documents to the Administrator of the Division of Child and Family Services of the Department, clarifying the authority of the State Board of Health to require require the licensing of certain facilities, requiring the Legislative Committee on Senior Citizens, Veterans, and Adults with Special Needs to conduct a study of the feasibility of formulating and operating a comprehensive state plan to provide behavioral health services and providing other matters properly named thereto. I have Amendment 950 proposed by the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services.
Assemblywoman Gorlow. Assemblywoman Peters. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 950 to Assembly Bill number 201.
Assemblywoman Peters has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 950 to Assembly Bill 201. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider Assembly Bill 243 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 243.
Assembly Bill 243, introduced by the Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections, that act relating to legislative affairs, making various changes relating to legislative interim committees and presiding officers to those committees, revising provisions relating to joint interim standing committees, revising the deadline to submit an application to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Education to serve on the Nevada State Teacher Recruitment and Retention Advisory Task Force, repealing the requirement that the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Health and Human Services review certain regulations, revising provisions relating to the two legislative committee members and staff regulated by the Nevada Lobbying Disclosure and Regulation Act and Nevada Financial Disclosure Act, and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 976 proposed by the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections.
Assemblywoman Gorlow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 976 to Assembly Bill number 243.
Assemblywoman Gorlow has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment 976 to Assembly Bill 243. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Mr. Speaker, may we consider Assembly Bill 72 for the purpose of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 72.
Assembly Bill 72, introduced by the Committee on Education, an act relating to education, creating the Advisory Committee on the Safety and Well-Being of Public School Staff, and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 931 proposed by the Senate Committee on Education.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 931 to Assembly Bill 72.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 931 to Assembly Bill 72. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under Order of Business 13, concur, not concur, can we consider AB 378?
We will consider Assembly Bill 378.
Assembly Bill 378, introduced by the Committee on Government Affairs and Act relating to public employees, revising certain provisions relating to the negotiation, mediation, and arbitration of collective bargaining agreements with the Executive Department of the State Government, making an appropriation and providing other matters properly in there too. I have Amendment 977, proposed by the Senate Committee on Finance.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur on Amendment 977 to Assembly Bill 378.
Assemblywoman Torres has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment number 977 to Assembly Bill 378. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. We will stay under Order of Business 13 for the purpose of recede, not recede. Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, may we consider Senate Bill 35 for the purpose of recede, not recede?
We will consider Senate Bill 35.
Senate Bill 35, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, enacting to control substances, establishing the crimes of trafficking and high-level trafficking in any mixture which contains illicitly manufactured fentanyl, establishing the crime of intentional misrepresentation of a fentanyl product, requiring each state and local enforcement agency and the Nevada Sentencing Commission to submit certain reports to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on the Judiciary, requiring to the extent money is available the establishment of certain programs to provide certain offenders or prisoners who have a substance use disorder with medicated assisted treatment, requiring the Joint Interim Standing Committee on the Judiciary to conduct an interim study concerning certain matters relating to forensic laboratories, providing penalties, and providing other matters properly thereto. I have Amendment 424 proposed by the Senate Committee on Judiciary.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Assembly do not recede from Assembly Amendment 734 to Senate Bill 35, that a conference be requested, and that the Speaker appoint a committee of 3 members to meet with a like committee from the Senate for the purpose of considering Senate Bill 35.
Assemblywoman Miller has moved that the Assembly not recede from Assembly Amendment number 734 to Senate Bill 35, that a conference be requested, and that the Speaker appoint a committee of 3 members to meet with a like committee from the Senate for the purposes of considering Senate Bill number 35. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly not receding signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. At this time, I will appoint Assembly members Brittany Miller, Considine, and Hardy as a committee on conference for the further consideration of Senate Bill number 35. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Staying in order of business 13 to consider Senate Bill 196 for the purpose of recede, not recede.
Senate Bill 196, introduced by Senator Hammond, enacting interscholastic activities, prohibiting certain persons from requiring a pupil to participate in certain out-of-school activities as a condition of participating in a sanctioned sport or spirit squad at a school, providing for a system of progressive discipline for certain violations, requiring certain persons to submit a report concerning any association with an out-of-school activity relating to a sanctioned sport or spirit squad, requiring certain school employees to notify a pupil and the parent or legal guardian of the pupil of certain rights afforded to the pupil before the pupil participates in a sanctioned sport or other interscholastic activity or event, providing for additional eligibility for certain pupils to participate in certain interscholastic activities, and providing other matters properly thereto.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly does not recede from Assembly Amendment 602 to Senate Bill 196, that a conference be requested, and that the Speaker appoint a committee of 3 members to meet with the Light Committee from the Senate for the purpose of considering Senate Bill 196.
Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod has moved that the Assembly not recede from Assembly Amendment 602 to Senate Bill 196, that a conference be requested, that the Speaker appoint a committee of 3 members to meet with the Light Committee from the Senate for the purpose of considering Senate Bill 196. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly not receding from the Assembly amendment signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. At this time, I will appoint Assembly members Anderson, Taylor, and Koenig as a committee on conference for the further consideration of Senate Bill number 196. We will stay in order of business 13 for concur, not concur. Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider AB 430 for purposes of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 430.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that
Assemblywoman, we have to let the clerk read it first. We are not going to consider Assembly Bill 430 at this time. Assemblywoman Howdigi. Would you like order of business 8?
Order of Business 8, Mr. Speaker.
Order of business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to suspend Rule 115 for the purposes of reconsidering the vote on Senate Bill 301.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Staying under Order of Business 8, having voted on the prevailing side, I move to reconsider the vote whereby Senate Bill 301 passed.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries. We'll go to Order of Business 12, General File, and third reading. Assemblywoman Howdigi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 511 be taken from its place on general file and be placed at the top of general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Senate Bill 511, introduced by the Committee on Finance. An act relating to state financial administration, making appropriations from the state general fund and the state highway fund for the support of the civil government of the state of Nevada for the 2023-2025 biennium, providing for the use of the money so appropriated, making various other changes relating to the financial administration of the state, and providing other matters properly laid thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 93, end of Section 93, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 28 ayes, 14 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, I declare it passed and ordered transmitted to the Senate. We will go to Order of Business 15. We will go back to Order of Business 13 for the purpose of concur, not concur. Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May we consider AB 430 for purposes of concur, not concur?
We will consider Assembly Bill 430.
Assembly Bill 430, introduced by the Committee on Revenue, an act relating to taxation, replacing provisions governing the excise tax on cannabis, requiring the Department of Taxation to adopt certain regulations, and providing other matters properly named thereto. I have Amendment 946, proposed by the Senate Committee on Revenue and Economic Development.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment Number 946 to Assembly Bill 430.
Assemblywoman Backus has moved that the Assembly concur in Senate Amendment Number 946 to Assembly Bill 430. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The motion carries by a constitutional majority. The Assembly has concurred in the amendment. The bill is ordered to enrollment. We're going to go to Order of Business 14, vetoed bills and special orders of the day.
Office of the Governor, June 3rd, 2023. The Honorable Steve Yeager, Speaker of the Nevada State Assembly, Nevada Legislature 401, South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada 89701, Reassembly Bill 11 of the 82nd Legislative Session. Dear Speaker Yeager, I am forwarding to you for filing within the time limit set forth in the Nevada Constitution and without my approval, Assembly Bill 11, AB 11, which is titled as follows: An Act relating to healthcare, prohibiting a hospital or psychiatric hospital from employing a physician under certain circumstances, providing penalties for a violation of such a prohibition, prohibiting a hospital from taking measures to restrict certain activity of a provider of healthcare who is employed by or serves as an independent contractor of the hospital, and providing other measures properly thereto. Although protecting patients is an important priority, AB 11 does not accomplish that goal. This bill prohibits hospitals from directly employing physicians. In Nevada, we are unfortunately already facing a shortage of healthcare providers. This bill would decrease access to care for Nevadans by placing significant burdens on the ability to recruit physicians to Nevada. Most states allow hospitals to employ physicians, and most physicians prefer to be involved in an employment relationship with their hospital. By eliminating hospitals' ability to directly employ physicians, we may exacerbate certain current recruitment shortfalls by disincentivizing both experienced and young physicians from coming to Nevada to seek employment. Not to mention, this bill would potentially serve as an incentive for current Nevada physicians who prefer employment to independent contracting to leave Nevada altogether. Moreover, access to physicians is critical to maintaining the health and wellness of Nevadans. This bill would remove longstanding policies which have incentivized physicians to accept employment at 501c3 not-for-profit hospitals and various government employers. In this regard, AB 11 would eliminate the ability for physicians to qualify for student loan forgiveness upon accepting such employment, thereby decreasing access to quality physicians in those hospitals, which currently serve over 35% of Medicaid inpatients. Since this bill will only serve to increase critical health care shortages across the state, specifically those in disadvantaged communities, I cannot support it. For these reasons, I veto this bill and return it to you without my signature or approval. Respectfully submitted, Joe Lombardo, Governor of Nevada. Assembly Bill 11, introduced by the Committee on Health and Human Services, an act relating to healthcare, prohibiting a hospital or psychiatric hospital from employing a physician under certain circumstances, providing penalties for a violation of such prohibition, prohibiting a hospital from taking measures to restrict certain activity by a provider of healthcare who is employed by or serves as an independent contractor of the hospital, and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 10, end of Section 10, end of bill. Senate Assembly Bill 97. Office of the Governor, June 3rd, 2023. The Honorable Steve Yeager, Speaker of the Nevada State Assembly, Nevada Legislature 401, South Carson Street, Carson City, Nevada 89701, Reassembly Bill 97 of the 82nd Legislative Session. Dear Speaker Yeager, I am forwarding to you for filing within the time limit set forth in the Nevada Constitution and without my approval, Assembly Bill 97, AB 97, which is titled as follows: An act relating to government administration, providing with certain exceptions that governmental entities shall not prohibit the use of certain refrigerants, and providing other measures properly named thereto. AB 97 was aimed at addressing an important goal for Nevada: to curb the use of certain refrigerants which have been associated with negative environmental impacts. This bill would have enabled the state to execute refrigerant replacement efforts. That said, this bill unfortunately goes one step too far in its aim to limit such refrigerant use. Currently, many large-scale buildings provide cool air through the facility using evaporative cooling mechanisms. This bill would not only allow a government entity to prohibit the use of such systems in the future, as is already done in Clark County, but would potentially require the removal of such a system already in place. An ordinance requiring that sort of removal would place an outrageous cost burden on many recreational, governmental, and business facilities throughout the state. The language of concern from Section 1, subsection 2 is as follows: 2. The governing body of any city or county or any other governmental entity may adopt a building code ordinance or take any other action to prohibit the construction or use of an evaporative cooling mechanism or restrict water service to properties that utilize such a mechanism. Emphasis added. The use of the phrase quote, or use of, end quote, in this section codifies an unprecedented ability for any city, county, or other governmental entity to enact an ordinance restricting the use of existing evaporative cooling systems in their jurisdiction, placing a significant financial burden on schools, hospitals, offices, hotels, casinos, and many other facility types that continue to use these systems for indoor climate control. Since AB 97 places a potentially extreme and unfounded cost burden on large-scale cooling systems across Nevada, I cannot support it. For these reasons, I veto this bill and return it without my signature or approval. Respectfully submitted, Joe Lombardo, Governor of Nevada. Assembly Bill 97, introduced by Assemblywoman Hardy, an act relating to governmental administration, providing with certain exceptions that governmental entities shall not prohibit the use of certain refrigerants and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 8, end of Section 8, end of bill.
Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Assembly Bill 11 and Assembly Bill 97 be placed on the Chief Clerk's desk.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. That will take us back to Order Business 12, General File, and third reading.
Senate Bill 301, introduced by Senators Lang et al., Assemblywoman Gorlow, an act relating to public works, advising provisions governing the circumstances under which a worker is deemed to be employed on a public work, making an appropriation and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
I have Amendment 949, proposed by Assemblywoman Torres.
Assemblywoman Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt amendment number 949 to Senate Bill 301.
Assemblywoman Torres has moved for the adoption of amendment number 949 to Senate Bill 301. Seeing no remarks, all those in favor of adopting the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. The amendment is adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
There are none.
The bill is ordered to general file. Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Order of Business 8, please.
Order Business 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that Senate Bill 301 be taken from its place on general file and be placed at the top of general file.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Senate Bill 301, introduced by Senators Lang et al., Assemblywoman Gorlow, an act relating to public works, advising provisions governing the circumstances under which a worker is deemed to be employed on a public work, making an appropriation and providing other matters properly named thereto. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1, end of Section 1, Section 3, end of Section 3, end of bill.
Assemblywoman, are there any amendments to Section 1 or the bill as a whole?
There are none.
Are there any remarks? Seeing none, the Chief Clerk will open the roll. Would anyone like to change their vote? The Chief Clerk will record the vote. There are 25 ayes, 17 nays. The bill having received a constitutional majority, declare it passed and order transmitted to the Senate. Under order of business 13, unfinished business for Assembly Bill 444. At this time, I will appoint Assemblypersons Backus, Considine, and Hafen as a committee on conference for the further consideration of Assembly Bill 444. Order of business 15, are there any remarks from the floor? Assemblywoman Howdiggy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Assembly stand in recess. Till call of the chair.
Hold tight for just a moment. Assemblywoman Howdiggy has moved that the Assembly stand in recess. To call of the chair, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are in recess.